Good evening, everybody. Thanks again for listening. You are listening to the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I am very excited to be before you guys this evening. I hope you all had a great weekend. I certainly had a great weekend. Just in case you guys don't know, my birthday was last Friday, and this entire weekend I have been able to celebrate my 22nd birthday well. I had the chance I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to support one of our fellow AGR personalities, Miss Brianne Cabell, aka Miss Breezy from the Uplift Show that airs every Thursday night at 8 p.m. In a production that she starred in for the novel that was adapted into a film project called For Colored Girls, where she portrayed the lady in purple. So she did a phenomenal job. I had the opportunity to sit back and watch the stage play at the La Familia Arts and Media Center on Saturday. It was a great show. And if you haven't had the opportunity to watch For Colored Girls, or if you haven't had the opportunity to read the novel, you really, really need to examine the story, and you really, really need to read the book so that you can educate yourself on the culture that existed back then and how it's brought us to where we are today. So I just want to give a shout out to Miss Breezy from the Uplift Show. She did a phenomenal job, and I enjoyed every minute of the play. So I just wanted to share that. And I thank you guys for the birthday wishes this past weekend, and even from Friday. The 22nd birthday has been really, really great. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest for this evening. I've been knowing this guy for a long time now. So this is Mr. Dominique Brightman. He is the host of the Going North podcast, and he is also an author, an award-winning author. He's published a couple of books that have been based off of his Going North podcast. He's established his career in podcasting for the last few years, and he's also been a part of many, many different projects and many platforms that I've been a part of and that we've been a part of together. So I just want to introduce you all to Mr. Dominique Brightman. He's also a public speaker, and he's a leadership coach. So I just want to give you guys an opportunity to meet Mr. Dominique Brightman. I've appeared on his shows many, many times, and this is my first time actually giving him an opportunity to have the floor and to talk about his experience in podcasting and in writing and even in public speaking. So welcome to the show. So how have you been?
Man, Nelson, thanks a bunch, man. Feeling great on a terrific Tuesday, man.
Yes. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about the work that you do in podcasting and as an author, because you've been doing it for a while now and you've received mainstream recognition for the work that you do in podcasting and as an author and as a leadership coach. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what that experience has been like for you thus far?
Sure thing. It's been one heck of a ride, to be honest. It's been one heck of a ride. Like this, it's really just a testament of what personal development can do for your life if you really tap into that power, because podcasting, leadership coaching, and development, heck, even would like to brand myself as a self-leadership trainer certified under the John Maxwell team. It's really all because of God basically blessing us with wonderful humans on the planet and them just leaving their gifts behind for us to really unwrap and open, and then us in turn to basically create gifts of our own and basically leave those gifts behind for other people to unwrap as well. So we're basically just living gifts that are basically sharing ourselves with the world for those who are ready, willing, and able to unwrap us and really just accept what we really have to offer. Because really, how I got started to all of this, it actually started, my goodness, I have to say, really back in church growing up, since it's Awesome God Radio and we do serve an awesome God, because I am definitely a born-again Christian, baptized, my goodness, back in 2003, and really truly accepted Christ for myself after a little research in 2004. Funny enough, my goodness, April 4th, 2004, which is still crazy to me, 17 years ago. But nonetheless, like getting that public speaking experience, saying scriptures, reciting those in church on Sunday mornings in front of hundreds of members of the congregation, going growing up basically to a teen, basically doing plays at church and having to remember a whole bunch of lines. And then even further in college, public speaking course, then discovering the wonderful works of John Maxwell, Brian Tracy, Grant Cardone, Jim Rohn, and so many others. And just taking that wonderful content, heck, even meeting inspiring people who've inspired me to really know how to act like a leader, because leaders are audacious, contagious, and tenacious. You have to really, especially while you're in your youth, be audacious enough, be bold enough to really seek out what you want to get out of life. Be contagious once you're bold, because once you are bold, like you, my friend Nelson, like you are a bold young man who has an audacity that folks twice your age wish that they had, heck, even now today. And now you're at a level where you can actually be contagious and spread that influence around in a positive way. And you have that tenacity to keep going, and leaders keep going, because those 3 points were shared with me by a wonderful guy by the name of Daniel Alley. And I've taken those points to heart to be able to really start a podcast, write multiple books, and become a best-selling author who's on a mission to inspire, encourage, and equip others to share their stories and to create their own piece of immortality.
Yes, and it is phenomenal that you've had the opportunity to inspire others through the work that you do. Because I do know that in order to be that influence and in order to be that role model and that representation as a leader and to be a leader, you have to work from the inside out in order to convey that message, to the people who are following your work and who are looking up to you. So another question that I did have for you was what made you want to become an author, and when did podcasting turn into a career for you? Because I know that you have the gift of public speaking, and you've been able to establish your own platform, and you've been able to articulate that not just through public speaking but also through creative writing. So could you tell us a little bit about where you got started and how it turned into a career for you? Because I'm almost certain that it started out as a hobby and then it turned into an everyday thing or an all the time thing. So could you tell us a little bit about that and how you got to where you are now?
Sure thing. So with the writing, funny enough, there's this wonderful book out there called The Magic of Getting What You Want. The Magic of Getting What You Want by David Schwartz. He's the same guy who wrote the book called The Magic of Thinking Big. And in that book, there is an activity where you write your own personal obituary. And in that obituary, I wrote that one of the many things I wrote down is that I was going to be a best-selling author of multiple books. And after doing that activity, writing that obituary, putting it on my computer, a few months later, went to this personal development conference. That was around November 2015. And instead of handing out business cards to people, a way to stand out to others, I would hand out these reading lists to people called the 100 Books for Dynamic Living. And on the list, there was all these wonderful books, but my name wasn't on the list. And this wonderful lady that I handed the list out to, she looked at the list, she looked right back at me, looked at the list, looked right back at me, and asked me where my book was. And I'm like, I'm 22, 23 at the time when this happened. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to write about? I'm a freaking early 20s here. Like, dude, I ain't got nothing to really say here, even though I was doing Toastmasters for a few years up to that point. And she was like, okay, all right, how about you? 1 year from today, write your very first book, and then you yourself can be on your own list. And I was like, nah, that sounds a little way out there for me. Now, mind you, this is after the obituary activity I did a few months earlier. And I was like, nah, I'm not doing it. And then she was like, hey, okay, how about we do something different? How about we both write our books a year from today, and we both can be published authors? And I was like, man, lady, you are freaking intense. I'm out of here. And a couple days later, I decided after some soul searching and telling one of my buddies about it, he realized, hey, you know what? This is like NaNoWriMo month, National Write Your Own Novel month at the time of that challenge, and this would be the perfect time to do it. I didn't write my own novel, but my pen was on fire after that, and I was able to write down 14 pages of raw content for my first book that became the last chapter for the first book ever, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself. And the beautiful thing about advancing is the fact that it's not just a one and done activity. It's something that you should continue to do in many areas of your life, whether it's mind, body, and spirit, whether it's that next level, being able to get stronger, to lift more weight, or to lose that extra fat, that extra set of pounds, or even that COVID-19 that we gained, not the virus, but maybe the actual pounds that we may have gained for being in the house last year and basically stuffing our gullets for some of us, and just really just advancing to the next level in whatever form it was. So after the publishing of that book a year later, handing it to that wonderful lady who challenged me, who saw the riches within myself, she was grateful and she was amazed and she was thankful for the that I was actually able to do it. And it was one heck of an opportunity. But sadly, 6 months later, after the book was published, my father died after a long battle with dementia. And I was doing a lot at that time. I was actually one of his caregivers at the time during his dying days, and I was still had a full-time job at the time doing Toastmasters full-time as well, because that was volunteer work I wasn't even getting paid for. I was just building up my leadership street cred in a way of being in a volunteer organization with folks who are 10 plus years older than me, when the average Toastmaster is 35 plus, and just getting that experience. And I realized, wow, like I really let myself really get beat down by the situation. And I realized a few months after his death that I needed to start a podcast of my own, because that was my original goal before a book even came to me. Like, that was my original goal. Folks been telling me I got this radio voice, and I'm like, oh, probably use for something. Oh, a podcast, that'll be great. And the side quest of the book happened, and it's like, oh wait, this will circle me back to goal one of the show. And that's one thing for folks listening right now to remember, is the fact that even though you may get sidetracked, you'll eventually be led back to where you need to be. And that podcast is really where I needed to be, because I decided to make it a weekly show where I interview different authors all over the globe. Originally, it was just going to be a bunch of self-published authors in the state of Maryland and just see how far I can go with it. But I stayed consistent with it enough to where it gets recognized internationally all over the globe. It was actually the top self-help podcast from 2018 to 2020, all because I was basically having a cheerful, helpful spirit coming from a place of service, giving fellow authors a platform to share their voices, get their voices heard, share their stories, and really just get like another piece of the puzzle figured out in my life. I was like, hey, like life is really all about customer service and customer love. Life is really about that, because everyone's a customer. There's a customer born every minute. And it even tailors back to the golden rule of treating others the way you want to be treated. Heck, even treating others the way they want to be treated if you want to advance to the next level of the platinum rule. And that all just led to where I am today, where I'm actually interviewing people all over the world. Probably, on average, I probably do 2 to 4 interviews a week. 2 episodes get launched a week. And starting in June, I'm going to be doing 3 episodes a week, because my backlog has gotten huge. And ever since last year, when folks realized how great podcasts were, they didn't mind the wait time. But I'm like, what the heck? Like, I might as well go ahead and grow the reach and do more content, because a lot of people love content. We love to devour great content, especially. And also the fact that 2 things happen. My goal with the show is to interview over 1,000 authors across the globe. And number 2, a couple of years ago, I was on a podcast with my good buddy Alex Dumas when he called it Abundance Daily. And on that show, I said 3 to 5 years from now, it's going to be a daily podcast. So this is just one step closer to that goal. So what you speak out into existence and keep in your subconscious mind, your actions will come out and help you to manifest that in real time. So really, it's just me putting myself out there, being around the right people, and taking that consistent action.
Yes, and that definitely is phenomenal to do. And I know that everybody is not meant to be a leader, because there may be a lot of people in leadership positions who are placed in leadership positions, but a lot of people don't really understand how valuable being a leader is, because oftentimes the biggest misconception is that leadership or being a leader is about having titles and doing things to just kind of boost your ego. or to feed into your ego. And that's not true, because being a leader is about uplifting others. And being a leader is about seeing the greatness in others. And it gives you a position to give people a leg up and not diminish, them or devalue them or to just completely dismiss their gifts. So, so when you wanted to become a certified leadership coach, who kind of pushed you to do that? Like, who were your biggest influences? Because I know that you may not have been confident at first about what that actually meant and what the responsibilities were in terms of what it meant to be a leader and what it meant to have that kind of calling in a way. So who were your biggest influences, and who kind of pushed you to become a certified leadership coach, and who saw the greatness in you to take on all of those responsibilities?
Yeah, great question. John Maxwell himself, my favorite author of all time. He is my biggest influence in life, probably my biggest influence in my life outside of my parents, and my older brother. Like outside of family, he's definitely my biggest influence. And as for those who actually informed me about the certification program that he actually has, it was actually, I'd say, around two or three people. Excuse me. So Clyde Middleton, he's one of them. Since he was a certified Maxwell trainer, probably about I'd say 4 years before I got mine. Another guy by the name of Chris Jordan, who actually let me know about a special discount they're running a couple years ago, where you can actually get the certified disc certification along with the leadership training. And a fellow Toastmaster, Luke Wright, and he's out in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He's actually a Marine. Funny enough, Clyde's actually a Marine too. He actually served in the Marines as well. And well, Chris, he served in the Air Force. They like to give him flack, but I'm not going to give him flack though, because he's cool. All three of them are cool. But all three of those guys, seeing them in action led me to the JMT, the John Maxwell Team Certification, and adding that to what I already do. Because before, like the thing about certifications, using it as an add-on, like the thing is, like a lot of folks out there, they may see like, oh, if I get the certification, I can command higher prices and I can do all this wonderful things. I can take over the planet. I can quit my job yesterday. Like it's not like that. It's really just a process, because I basically had my own business before getting that certification. And even after getting that certification, I've only scratched the surface of it, barely. Like there's so many things I haven't even done with it yet. Like after, heck, even before getting it, I tag team with Chris Jordan to run a couple events, Inspired to Lead, where myself and a few other speakers, Clyde was one of them, and we were just giving basic wonderful leadership training to those who would attend, and just equip them to really go out there and take themselves to a higher level. Heck, even one guy out in Arkansas who attended, I believe his name was John Casey, if I'm not mistaken. He had a new management position the Monday after attending one of the events. So one of the lines that someone dropped during the event was something that he needed going into the workplace that day. So that's really what happened, is just being around those wonderful gentlemen and just sharing with me what it all entails. Because those who are part of the team, we do 5 different things. So we speak, we coach, we train, we assess behavior, and we play the leadership game. And the leadership game is something that I'm open to, like doing with certain companies. If someone's listening to this right now and they want me to come in and play that with y'all, heck, we can even do it virtually with like a group of about a good 10 people. So that way we can really dive in and really build up those relationships, build up that cohesiveness, and really get to a deeper bond with one another, and heck, even help take your company to the next level is something that we do. And heck, even speaking of coaching, like coaching is something that I was able to learn to do, and realizing that everyone has greatness within themselves. Everybody has value, and a buzzword in the marketplace and entrepreneurship is value. And sometimes I hate that word when people say it, because sometimes I feel like, oh, you're shouting BS, because every human being has value. You, the listener right now, have value because you are alive. You are listening to this right now. You have value. And it's like bringing value. It's like, okay, so are you bringing yourself to the equation? But really, just true value is basically acknowledging one another for who we are, human beings who still bleed the same. We all have a finite lifespan in this form, in this lifetime, and we all have something wonderful contribute to the world. And higher value is when you take that contribution to the next level. So that's really what the certification and becoming a leadership coach is all about, and a leadership trainer is all about, is helping others to realize that they have value and that we can help you unlock a higher level of value, and that you can be around other wonderful human beings like my man Dr. Eric Holmes, who's in the chat right now. Like that man, I like to call him the spiritual physician of endurance, because that man is full of energy. Like being around folks like him is also part of leadership, because people see and people do. So when people see that you are a progressive influence, they in turn will want to do something progressive for their own lives if they really channel into that inner level of greatness that they have.
Yes, and all of that, it is really great to know. So what are the qualities? Well, since you are pretty much you're a certified leadership coach, so you know the ins and outs of what it means to be a leader, and that's why I just wanted to ask you, what are some of the qualities you think that a leader should possess? And if you want to be a mentor, let's say, what are some of the qualities that you think a mentor should have, or that a leader should have, if they want to see the greatness in others and if they want to elevate others? So what are some of those qualities look like, and what are some of those qualities? Um, how important is it, I should say? Um, is it for a leader to be confident in their abilities and their ability to lead? So what does that look like, and what does that feel like from your perspective?
Yeah, sure thing. So, some great qualities of a leader. One is communication, being a good communicator. And being a communicator, that's just an umbrella, because there's a lot of other facets under that. There's being able to read body language, tonality is another thing, because you may give somebody direct instructions, but if you say it to someone like you're talking to them like you're their parent or their mother or something, like they may not like you. So, basically, body language, being able to read it, tonality, written communication, because emojis are great and all for fun and games on social media and with your family, and heck, even occasionally on emails with your colleagues and whatnot. But that's not going to fly in a business entrepreneurial environment. You have to be able to communicate with people one on one in multiple ways and have to clearly understand what you're saying. And public speaking is under that. The next one is confidence, being able to have a level of confidence, a level of unseen faith in your abilities, in your people, and in what you can do and the information that you're sharing with other people, because you have to be able to communicate effectively. You have to also be confident enough to deliver the news, whether it's good or bad. And I'm sure a lot of folks have gotten some experience with that last year in particular, because heck, even like the wonderful Grim Reaper year of 2020 was a year where a lot of folks were like, "Oh God, I can finally say it's like, hey, I don't know," because nobody knew, especially in March in the U.S. of A. Like nobody really knew what was going on, because it was a new virus, new to everybody in the masses. We was like, "Oh God," it's like, man, like if I cough, like are they gonna excommunicate me? Are they gonna like kill me or something? Like if I sneeze, like do I have to like wash my hands and then wash my hands again after wash my hands because I turned the knob to wash my hands with? It's like being comfortable enough to accept the fact that, hey, you may not know everything, but you can find the answer. And that's the next thing, too, about a wonderful leader. Heck, even with those who are good mentors, is the fact that they have a growth mentality. They have a growth mindset, always learning and growing, always getting better, and focusing on learning things new, because every 6 months something changes. Every 6 months, probably almost every 3 months. Heck, even another thing a lot of folks do, like 12-month years, those quarterly years. There's like 4 quarters in a year, 12 months in a year, 4 different quarters, the January, February, March, then of course April, May, June, and so on and so forth. So making sure that you're able to not only communicate effectively, be able to have confidence within yourself and the people that are around you and that you're leading, but having a growth mindset to being open to learning new and more things. And that even another thing about leadership, it doesn't have to be a title. It doesn't have to be a job position. It just has to be you where you are right now influencing the person right next to you. You can have one person following you. You'll be a leader. You can have a job title and nobody follows you. They're only there because they want the paycheck. That's the other thing about leadership. Also wanted to throw out there and remind people of job titles don't mean you're a leader. Like heck, even my heck, even like currently I'm president of the Randallstown Network Toastmasters. I may be the president, but around me is an elite group of club officers who have a lot more life experience than I do. Heck, even the club founder is still part of the club himself. And even though I have the title of president, I still defer to them for their job duties and what they also have to contribute as well. And I love hearing from them because they have great things to contribute. And even though I may have the title, the highest title in the certain group, there are those who have a higher level of influence where folks listen more to them as opposed to the person with the title. So that's another thing in mind. And the quick touch on mentorship. When it comes to mentorship, being a good listener also goes in with the leadership that can kind of go hand in hand, but also being willing to learn and listen is another thing for mentors and mentees. Heck, even one question I love for mentees to ask themselves and then heck even tap into their mentors about is how can I stay relevant in my field? Or heck even how can I add more value to more people in less time? And who can help me reach that goal? Because a wonderful mentor, heck even next level mentorship, a sponsor to also be your cheerleader as well, getting you to certain rooms at certain places is a wonderful thing. So being like the mentee, they have to be willing to listen. The mentor, they have to be willing to share. The mentee, they have to be willing to not only listen, but also learn. And the mentor also has to be willing to learn too, because mentorship also with teaching, you're learning something twice. And when you see them grow, you'll grow too, because you'll be like, hey, like I'm responsible for their success, or at least a part of their success, and I'm grateful for it. I don't need to brag to the world about it, but just seeing them grow and getting better makes me feel fulfilled. And that's another thing too, is the art of fulfillment. That's another thing about mentorship. It allows you to feel that sense of fulfillment, because that's something a lot of folks may have lost last year with employment, like heck, even with loved ones. And having that sense of fulfillment is something that we all desire. So that's one of those, another long-winded answer to your question about leadership and mentorship.
No, it's not long-winded. I definitely understand everything that you've just laid out on the table. But one thing that I definitely like about what you said is that, just because you have a specific job title, in the workplace, it doesn't mean that you're a leader, and it doesn't mean that you display any of those qualities. A lot of people, they want power trips. They just want that power and that status just to say that they have the status, but it doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that people are going to respect you just because you're in that position. People may kiss up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people respect you in that leadership position or in that capacity. So I definitely want to note that, because that's what people see every day. I think that's one of the most common misconceptions people have about leadership. They they try to place attributes on people in leadership positions as leaders, and that's not necessarily true all the time. It's about your character and your integrity and what you stand for and what your foundation looks like and what it feels like in your morals and everything. So I definitely do like the fact that you noted that, with your answer and with what you just said. So what advice would you give? Well, before I go there, what kind of projects are you working on right now? And what kind of projects have you been working on since the beginning of the pandemic? And since we've all been, even though restrictions have been lifted and they are still, well, they are gradually, we're gradually getting back to a sense of normalcy. So what are some of the projects that you've been working on ever since the pandemic began and last year? And what kind of projects are you working on for this year? Because we are already finished the first quarter of the year and we're in the second quarter of the year. So what are you working on now?
Great question. The wonderful thing about the pandemic is even though it was a lot of devastation that happened, there was still some solace that came out of it. like last year in particular, even though at first everybody got shell shocked, we got rocked with everything. Those who were able to come to and get back up after getting that Mike Tyson punch from last year, especially one of those hook punches where he uses the hips for full power, metaphorically speaking. Last year, I was able to contribute to a multi-author project called From Crappy to Happy, Secret Stories of Transformational Joy that reached bestseller status last year. For those who are familiar with James Redfield, author of The Celestine Prophecy, he contributed a chapter to the book as well as writing the foreword for that book. That's one project. The next thing I was able to do was that I was able to, in a way, 10x my podcast, the Going North podcast, because I interviewed so many people last year. My last year was my biggest year yet, with over 137 different authors from all over the globe. 137, and there's probably about 142 episodes in total, since a couple of them were returning guests. And not only that, I was also able to even get on more virtual stages and actually build up the wonderful side hustle that I have to a higher level of status. Like, I even had my first ever audiobook project for someone else. I actually the voice behind a certain book for Stanley McCluskey called Divorce is Worse Than Death. And I'm the voice behind that book because he was a guest on my show. We know each other through Toastmasters, and he liked my voice, and I've been a good person to him, and he saw fit to actually allow me to be the voice behind his first awesome project, just spreading the message and awareness like, hey, divorce is definitely worse than death for a lot of people, and the fact that it can be a little devastating for a lot of people. As for this year, I'm growing my podcast even more. Like I mentioned earlier, going to be doing 3 days a week, Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. A new different author is going to have their interview go live. Also, I'm working on my 4th book. It's going to be called Pod Book It, The 3 Phases of Greatness, by writing a book, launching a podcast, and creating a legacy. That's going to be a book, audiobook, and online course, because a lot of folks have learned a lot last year. Podcasts have exploding. Like, heck, even I remember last April, Apple Podcasts / iTunes, they got to a count of 1 million podcasts on their platform. And good luck finding a mic last year, heck, even a webcam, because they were sold out for probably about a good month in total, because everybody was at home and they're like, oh, I'm working from home, but I got my projects done early. Like, what am I going to do with all this free time? Oh, yeah, I can start that podcast or a Facebook group or something. So I'm basically going to be doing that project. That's going to be out by the end of the year. Pod Book It, the book and online course to help folks to become a bookcaster, a person who writes a book, and heck, even creates a brand by launching a podcast based off of their book, or heck, even doing one or the other.
Yes, there's so many opportunities for you to make an impact and to make a difference in other people's lives, and there are so many opportunities out there today for you to use your platform and your position to do great things and to make great things happen, so to speak. So, what advice would you give to listeners who are interested in starting a podcast or a radio show or a platform where they can talk about their experiences, or where they can interview people who have made a difference or who have established careers in their respective fields? What advice would you give to people who want to invest their time and energy into a radio show or into a broadcast? Because some people don't really understand how much you have to sacrifice in order to plan all of this, and how you have to have late nights and early mornings. Sometimes people operate on 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep, trying to get things together, even though that's not recommended. It happens. Sometimes you may feel swamped because you may feel overwhelmed with the projects that you're working on, or what you're trying to orchestrate for the next broadcast or for the next show. Sometimes you're just operating on 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep, trying to get everything together. And sometimes you forget that, okay, you're only one person. Sometimes you just need to take a step back and exhale sometimes, because we've gotten into the rhythm of just doing everything. And I think that's the beauty of the pandemic. is that it gave people no option but to just sit down and just, stay seated, for an extended period of time. People couldn't go anywhere or do anything. So I think that experience humbled us, not having the ability to do anything that we wanted to do, keeping ourselves distracted by things that really didn't matter and focusing on what really does matter throughout the course of the year. So I think that was the beauty of the pandemic last year. I think that experience was supposed to humble us and help us figure out what really mattered. So what advice would you give to people who want to pursue what you're pursuing?
Ah, yeah, sure thing. So I have to definitely say I have a wonderful presentation called the 5 C's for explosive growth, and I think I'll drop 3 out of the 5 C's. So the first one's curiosity, being curious about how to start. And one way to start in this journey is to listen to other podcasts, other radio shows, and picking your favorites. Heck, maybe even start studying a podcast, like maybe one a month or something. Like if they have a bunch of episodes out there, getting a feel for the host, how they do it. Heck, even listening to podcasts on how to start a podcast. Heck, even one guy, there's a guy by the name of Dave Jackson, if I'm not mistaken. He has a podcast called The Podcasting School, if I'm not mistaken. Also, another guy to check out is, and heck, I think you even know him too, Nelson, is Tom Antion. He has a podcast called Screw the Commute, and I was lucky enough to be a guest on his platform last week, so be sure to check that out as well, because he has a couple episodes out there on one, how to start a podcast, another one on how to be a great podcast guest, and heck, even another one is how to monetize it. So being curious, always being curious, learning as much as you can about them. Then the next C is commitment, making sure that you start. And when you start, make sure you get some wonderful equipment. Like, don't spend too much on equipment. Sound quality is great, but I'd say get yourself a nice solid mic. Like, my favorite mic is probably the one I'm using right now, the Blue Snowball microphone. And a lot of folks in the podcasting space will probably be like, oh God, he's one of those. He uses those condenser mics. Like, stone him. But hey, it's a really good mic, especially if you're in a room that doesn't have any carpet in it. Like, I'm currently in a room where it's not fully carpeted anymore at the moment. So this mic doesn't pick up as much less, and my voice carries a lot better and a lot stronger with it. And plus, this mic doesn't die on me halfway through a conversation like another mic out there. Kind of get a little technical here. The Samson Q2U. It's a great microphone. It sounds even crisper than the Blue Snowball, but the problem is with that mic, I bought it, but it didn't come with the USB cable that was long enough to reach my older laptop at the time. So after I bought it, it was basically no good to me for 3 months. Then upgrading my technology, it was good for another 3 months. But then after a while, when I kept doing interviews, like, it kept switching back to my laptop microphone that was built in as opposed to the Samsung mic, because it just kept dying on me. I don't know why. Like, I probably got like a lemon here, but just getting yourself a good microphone. I'd say don't waste no more than $200 on, if you're going to start a podcast, because it's a low cost entry investment. That's why so many people are doing it. So being curious, knowing what the other podcasters do and use, getting a good microphone, having a good setup, making sure you have good Wi-Fi if you're going to be doing interviews like this on StreamYard. StreamYard's a great platform. Zoom is a great platform. I use Zoom for my recordings now. Funny enough, I started off with conferencecall.com. There's nothing about commitment. You have to start with what you have to get what you want, because no one starts off with 1 million followers on YouTube and all these social media platforms and become an overnight success. Overnight success happens overnight, many nights, for years on end. Like you mentioned earlier, some nights when you're getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep, of late nights, early mornings. And it's not a good habit, but sometimes it does take that extra effort to get what you want. So being curious, being committed, and starting with it. And then also consistency. One of the major reasons why podcasters fail is because they're not consistent. If you find a good podcast with an interesting cover art and title out there, but they only have 6 episodes, you did a listener a disservice, because some people are like, man, I'm not going to start this podcast because they get to episode 10 and they're basically like done. Like there's like with podcasts, there's like no real formal ending. They just like stop. That's the thing. They just stop because either the host, they probably like life happened and they may have moved on to something else, or they didn't have enough money to keep it going, or even they just couldn't keep up with everything. It's just like so many reasons. And one of the reasons that I became one of the top 10 self-help podcasters in the world, according to Steve Olsher, is because I was consistent. I stayed consistent. After episode 32, I got a wonderful pitch from a media company asking me to interview one of their guests. And he was a black belt millionaire martial artist who became a millionaire twice over because he got rich once, lost all of his wealth because he blew it all on Lamborghinis on all the material stuff. And then he was able to get it all back later because he still had the principles within himself. And he decided to be more wise with his money the second time around. Heck, even another person reached out to me. And all these people kept reaching out to me because I stayed consistent. And I also love to have fun with what I do. Like one of the major things I see in YouTube comments, listening and watching other interviews, especially on some platforms, and which I commend you for not doing this, is cutting off your guest. Now, granted, sometimes cutting off is necessary if you're like doing a certain particular show where you have a time limit and you may have to reach a certain point, or they may be getting a little too boring, or you see the dropping off of listeners or whatever. Like in some sense, like, yes, it's good, but most times, like making sure you're not cutting off the guests if they're in the middle of a story, make sure you're having fun with them, making sure they feel at ease. Heck, even a bonus tip, making sure you have a scheduling link if you do podcasts. So that way, if someone asks to be on your show, you'd be like, hey, here's a link, pick a date, and you'll have these wonderful reminders. It'll be on both of our calendars, and that'll be more accountability for both parties involved. So that way I don't forget, and that way they don't forget. So that's just a few things that someone wants to start. Be curious, be committed, and be consistent.
Yes, it's very creative. Those are three out of the five C's, and I definitely understand what you're saying because a lot of people just see the journey from A to Z, not just with podcasting or with becoming, an award-winning author, but just with anything that they want to establish for themselves. People get flustered, they get frustrated because they feel like they may be doing something wrong or they're not where they're supposed to be. But it just requires, like you said, consistency, time, and patience for you to invest your time, energy, and sometimes even your money in order to do what you want to do and in order to get to a certain point. Because if you think about it, many of the public figures who are millionaires or who are billionaires, they didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to have $1 million in the bank by this date, and this is what I'm going to do. And I no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can't. You have to demonstrate some flexibility with yourself because sometimes we can be hard on ourselves. I know that for me, I'm a huge perfectionist. So I know my ways, and I know that when things don't go the way I anticipate, I get frustrated, and I know that about myself. But then, I have people who hold me accountable and who are by my side just to remind me that, this is still the beginning. You're still young. You still have a long way to go, to get to where you want to be. It's not going to happen overnight. You're still doing a good job. So that's what we all have to remember, because I know that, like, I don't know about you, but I know that, I'm a perfectionist. So I get flustered and frustrated sometimes when things don't work out the way I anticipate, or sometimes I find myself in the middle of the night. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? I need to be in bed. I'm still looking at this computer. I've been on this computer for 5 hours. I need to get up and I need to go to bed, and I need to just pick back up on it tomorrow, or maybe take a break, a mental health day, to just not do anything. And when I catch myself doing something, I stop myself sometimes because I'm like, okay, this is too much. I need to take a step back. So I do definitely understand everything that you're saying about, being consistent and being patient with yourself, and just having the ability to create good content, clean content that people enjoy and that people love, so that they can tune in every week and look forward to something great. So let's see. Where can the listeners find you? I know that you've you've appeared on many different platforms, and you're very active on social media. So where can some of the listeners find you?
Yep, sure thing. So feel free to reach out to me, dombrightman.com. I have a contact me page. I'm also on social media. Like everything is at Dom Brightman, the LinkedIn, especially trying to use that more often, Instagram, Facebook. I'm also heavily active on Facebook on my personal page, since my personal page is my business page because I don't use social media for journaling and putting my life out there like that. That's not me because that's not what it's for. And Twitter, especially, is also great. I use that to promote my podcast heavily as well, since Twitter requires a lot of wit. It's not as much of a cesspool as folks may think. There's a happy part of Twitter, especially if you use the hashtag Writers Community. It's a great, wonderful place of happy Twitter to be. So everything is all at Dom Brightman. Feel free to drop me a line. Definitely respond as well. Now, granted, if you're trying to capture me in a pyramid, I might not respond then, but that's a whole different story.
Yes, 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 and that's great. And you're usually very accessible, so so it's pretty easy to get in touch with you. So a couple of quick questions. These are kind of just fun, off the blue questions that I thought about. So, what was your favorite book to read as a child?
Oh man, favorite book to read as a child. My goodness, that's a probably some comics. My goodness, especially the manga comics like the Rurouni Kenshin, Buso Renkin, like like Japanese manga comic books, definitely.
Okay. So what were some of your favorite books, that you've been reading as an adult to kind of help you move forward in different areas of your life? Because I do know that, we all learn from other people. We're not just leaders. We are also being led by somebody. So what are some of the books or that you read or that you listen to as audiobooks that kind of help you learn about your journey and where you want to go?
Yes. So those who know me, I'm going to say a particular name, and you already know I'm going to say John Maxwell, The 15 Laws of Growth. That book is a powerful book. That book is definitely a powerful book. John Maxwell's 15 Laws of Growth and John Maxwell's Leadership. Leadership. That book actually came out a year before the pandemic. And that's probably the Bible of those in a pandemic if you want to really grow to the next level. Another wonderful book I recommend people to read, and really anything by Brian Tracy. Like he has so many great things. This guy was actually he actually was a he actually got kicked out of high school because he stayed there until he was 21. Then he went across South Africa and journeyed all over the world, all the way there from Canada. And now he's in his late 70s, a multimillionaire who is probably he's easily in the top 10 public speaking legend Hall of Famers of all time living, because he, on average, he reads 30 books to produce one book. So anything by Brian Tracy, especially for those looking to advance in life, in addition to my own book, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, he has a nice little 21 series. So he has one called The 21 Lessons of Self-Made Millionaires, 21 Lessons and Tips to Get Paid and Promoted Faster, heck, even 21 Tips to Live to Be 100. Like it's really some really great tips by him. And another book I'll recommend. Let's see, another one. I'd have to say Think and Grow Rich is definitely another book, definitely a good book to read, especially if you look up a guy on YouTube by the name of Paul Martinelli. Paul Martinelli, he actually wrote an epilogue to the book because that one book, Think and Grow Rich, really transformed his life. And he eventually became an author last year, writing the epilogue to that book, including his own story, because he himself was basically a poor Italian kid growing up in Pennsylvania. And he was referred to as the dumb child, and he had a speech impediment because he was afraid to speak. And he was basically getting beaten by his parents, especially his mother, because his mother was traumatized in her youth, heck, even in her adulthood. And just a real powerful story. So those are that's a nice little smorgasbord for folks to get started with. Definitely check those book out. Like start off with one thing. Just one thing. You don't want to get too swarmed.
Yes, I've been through that before, and you don't want to read too many books at once because you can't keep up with uh, where you are in that story or in that book. So I do understand what you mean when you say that. So are you mentoring anybody in particular as a certified leadership coach right now? Because I do know that even though you speak on your podcast and you write your books, and you convey the message that you're trying to send to your listeners in many different ways. So sometimes some of the best uh, qualities that you can look for in a leader or in yourself as a leader and in leadership is when you have that kind of intimate one-on-one time with a person that you're mentoring or someone that you're trying to elevate. So is there anybody that you are mentoring right now in particular to try to elevate them to the next level because you see their potential? Because sometimes, especially growing up, that it's very, very difficult for some of us to see our own abilities and to recognize what our gifts are. And when people speak life into us, we gradually tend to gravitate towards, what they see us doing later on. It usually shows up in some way or another later on in our lives. So are you doing that for anybody right now in particular?
Oh yeah, definitely. Funny enough, got two podcast mentees. A buddy of mine, Matt, he's actually running his wonderful show right now. He's taking a break right now. He's going to be revving up for season 2 soon. He's interviewing a lot of soap opera actors and actresses that he admired growing up because sometimes he would be with his mom watching just the soaps with her and is like, oh, now I get to actually interview him and talk with them. It's like from TV to in front of you on the TV screen. And another buddy, Chaz Jackson, is another podcast mentee of mine, and he's taking it to a whole new level because he's not only taking my advice, but also the advice of other people, and decide to make it a live stream show and repurposing it into a podcast. That's even another bonus idea for folks out there if they want to try to do less background work, even though it'll put more pressure on you as a host, is to kind of do what Nelson's doing right now, live streaming a wonderful one-on-one conversation with multiple people, then just repurposing it as a podcast later, taking it and spreading out to multiple different platforms. So not only folks get that one-on-one experience and they're like in watching TV with a live conversation, but they also get the aftermath too. So those are two folks that are mentees at the moment.
Well, that's awesome. And it's so great that you have the opportunity to have that intimate one-on-one experience with two people in particular. So you can watch them grow and, you can elevate them to the next level. And one thing that I think I forgot to mention about leadership is that sometimes people have a hard time distinguishing between what the true leader is, because sometimes people who are in leadership positions have an issue with people that they may have mentored in the past if they surpass them. So I think that another thing to note about being a leader and about you being a mentor is that, you can't become envious of your mentee's success if they surpass you. Now, some people are good with people staying at a certain level. Sometimes people are good. They only elevate you to a certain point, but they keep you at a certain point too, because they don't want that person surpassing them. So could you tell us a little bit about that and what that looks like, or how's that, or if you've ever seen that before where, people may have had an issue with their mentees surpassing them or having more than them in a way? Because sometimes people, they don't want you to have more than them, even if you are great. They may feel threatened by what you have to offer. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so for that, really, it's something that sometimes I don't even pay attention to. Like it's probably even happened in my own life with me not even knowing it, because sometimes I can be oblivious to stuff like that because I'm so focused on growing myself and trying to be a positive influence to other people and to myself that I just don't even pay that any mind. And even though sometimes it may be like, heck, like, oh man, this person's got all these social media followers. Like, heck, even one thing that my pastor mentioned in one of the officers meeting when he was meeting with all the church leaders last year is the fact that he's not jealous of anyone's gifts. He's like, hey, just bring your gifts here to the church and let us use it to grow the kingdom together. Like that's the mindset that I prefer to go under, and that's what I prefer to follow because like my mentees, like they're in different, even though we're similar, even though we're all young black guys here, like YGB, young, gifted, and black, we're in certain niches that are a little bit different, but are the same. We're all doing interview based shows, but things are a little different. Like my show, I interview only authors. Like Matt, he does opera actors and actresses, and occasionally does have an author too on there. And Chaz, he like especially last year when he started off, their theme for the show was Summer Soldiers, equipping young black males with the tools that they need for success. And like you would think, it's like, hey, maybe I should have I'll have all black folks on there, but no, not really. He actually expanded it and introduced them to some wonderful people. Had some wonderful folks. Had some ladies on there who gave some tips. Had a couple gentlemen who were white as well. So white. So it's like, hey, like even though that was the original theme, it branched out into other ways, and they usually do theirs live stream and then it just distributes to other places, as opposed to myself where I stay in my lane and I make sure it's a nice one-on-one conversation in Zoom, and then it gets edited and uploaded later because one, it's more comfortable for both me and the guest. Two, with the live show, with sometimes I can, well, I don't think they're too deep, but sometimes when I ask questions, especially at the end of every episode, if it's their first time on the show, the advice that we give to the 25-year-old self, if they are currently in the current year with all their knowledge and experience, some people actually go back to that year and say what they would actually do. Like one guest in particular, I won't say her name, she said she would actually not be a mom. And I took that part out because I wanted to protect her and her sons. So that's the other thing too. I want to protect the people as well. I want to keep their credibility in mind as well. So that's the other thing too. Like mentors and mentees, don't be jealous of other people. That's the other thing too. Main message: if you're jealous of other people, level up yourself, because the person you may be jealous of, they may prefer to have your lifestyle. Heck, even listening to one, his sentence is probably extra longer than what it should be, but listening to one audiobook, and I believe it was a preacher by the name of Mike Murdoch. He was mentioning how he was traveling all over the world with this top evangelists who have thousands of members, these big mega churches, 80,000 people. Yet his father himself, in his 80s, still has the peace of God with him because he has a church with under 100 members without all the headache and heartache. Like, if you can have that peace of God within yourself, that peace that surpasses all understanding with what you have, it doesn't matter what anyone else has, because whatever they have, they may want to get rid of some of it and outsource it to someone else. So don't be jealous of what other people have, because the people that you may be jealous about, if you're jealous about them, may have things that they may want to outsource. They may just want to go in a corner somewhere and relax and do nothing. Like, it's a goal for a lot of adults to be able to wake up to no alarm clock and basically have nothing on the schedule, to just do nothing, be lazy, Netflix and chill with no worries in the world. So that's my feedback for that one.
Yeah, so I definitely do appreciate that. You were given a sermon. I was about to pass around the collection plate. You were given a sermon just
I
now.
accept donations, though. I accept donations. Don't worry. Cash App Dom Brightman, too. Don't worry.
Well, I definitely do appreciate you for having. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be on my show. One last question before we end the broadcast. What would you say to your old self? Let's just say, at like 18 years old. What would you say to yourself if you because now of course is not the same you when you were like 18, 20, 22 years old. So what would you say to yourself?
Man, I would say a lot. One, join Toastmasters. Two, Start your martial arts training now as well, and don't slack off on it, because if you don't, you're going to gain a bunch of weight, buddy. So join Toastmasters. Start your martial arts training a lot sooner. Also, read books a lot sooner, especially John Maxwell's material, and take your life to the next level, because there's great material out there for you to read. There's great stuff for you out there to gain. And if you put yourself in that sandbox, you'll definitely create your own sandcastle of awesomeness.
Well, thank you for being a part of my broadcast. And I definitely encourage everyone to listen to this broadcast and to go back and listen to many of Mr. Brightman's podcasts. I listen to his podcast all the time. I encourage you all to listen to both of our shows, because we have amazing people on both of our broadcasts, and we are both on the same journey in terms of getting to where we want to be, in terms of inspiring other people and being that influence and that role model that people want to see, in the media and through different sources of media. So again, thank you for appearing on my show this evening. I encourage you all to make an appointment to meet me back here at 6 p.m. on May 25th. I'm still in the process of getting our guests for next week. So again, I encourage you all to make an appointment to meet me back here on May 25th from 6 to 7 p.m. This is the Beauty in Us Radio on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I will see you next week. Have a great evening. You still have to wear your mask inside. You still have to wash your hands. I'm still keeping my distance personally. And just don't be nasty, but continue to move forward as we all continue to go back to a sense of normalcy. So I hope you all take care.